Hi, my name is Cassandra McFarland, and I did my project on women during World War One. During this time, men were sent off to fight. Men and children were sent off to fight, and a lot of women had to take care of the household and continue the daily things that their husbands usually do. A lot of them actually went off to work to obtain money. A lot of them worked in industries. A lot of them worked in the fields. And because of that, a lot of women did not get paid the same way as men did, or the same way as men would have gotten paid. They actually got paid less, or they were working in poor working conditions, such as factories where they weren't able to breathe, or they would really work long, strenuous hours without compensation. Some of them would even go weeks without being paid. So back then, it was really hard for women during that time just because they didn't really have any rights to speak, they didn't have any rights to vote. So a lot of them ran into different complications during that time because it was a time where they didn't have men there to take care of them. So they really had to fend for themselves. During this time, there was also a lot of new developments for women. Prostitution was very common. If they weren't able to find work, a lot of women resorted to selling their bodies, which led to things such as unplanned pregnancies, which was really frowned upon during that time as well. So that kind of forced women in a different route as well during that time. I actually picked a woman called Mary Van Klecht, who was a social worker during that time, and she was an advocate for women's rights and women's working conditions. She really fought um, to basically enhance and make women's working conditions during that time better. Her main focus during that time was factory workers because during that time, working in a factory, how it was back then, was very extreme. They were in very extraneous conditions. There wasn't any air conditioning like there is now. There wasn't any heat, so they would really work in brutal conditions. And a lot of them had no choice. Like they would have to go to work and do what they had to do to support their family. And a lot of women during that time would either get sick, they would die off just because they were working so hard in these conditions. So Mary Van Fleck actually came up with this organization called the U.S. Women's Bureau, which basically is an organization that focuses mainly on um, women and working conditions and making sure that their working conditions is fine, that they're not working strenuous hours. And she also, during that time, she actually came up with she actually she actually got a legislation to be passed where women weren't able to work past a certain time. So they were actually able to go home past a certain time. So at nighttime, they weren't really able to work. It was mostly during the day. And she also focused on making sure that they got enough money to actually support their lifestyle. Because a lot of women, they were getting paid scraps and they weren't able to afford certain things that they needed for their household. And that made them have to work even more. And then, you know, um, so I did my interview on her. Um, and I also did an article on how women get paid less than men, because that's still a problem that we're having today, where we're not getting equal pay compared to men. It's actually reported that men get paid 77 cents more than women, regardless of if we're in the same position as them, we have the same degree as them. We're actually still getting paid less, which is actually shocking because you don't think in the 21st century that's something that would still be happening, but unfortunately it is. And it's what's interesting is that a lot of women aren't aware of that. They're not aware that a coworker of theirs who's a man just might be getting paid more than them. Yeah, 77 cents doesn't seem that much, but 77 cents adds up. And at the end of the day, it's not fair for a man to get paid more than a woman just because he's a man. Like nothing, like if you're going to pay me more, at least, if you're going to pay someone more, at least make sure that they have, you know, like the standards required. It shouldn't be based off of sex. It should be based off of your characteristics or what you bring to the job or what you have to offer. So I did my article on that. because today a lot of women today are still fighting to get paid equally as men. I actually wrote an article about a woman who worked at Goodwill, which is like a tire industry, like they work with cars, and she actually found out that so she was getting raises, but she actually found out that her raises compared to her other coworkers who happened to be men was nearly not even close. Like she was getting paid chicken scraps compared to what they were getting. And she actually ended up suing them because that is a violation of an amendment, and she actually won the fight. So, a lot of women today are starting to realize that it's time to take a stand. It's not we're living in a time where women have a voice, where we're able to speak up and not hide behind anything anymore. So a lot of women are starting to speak up and let it be known that we are here and it's time for us to be equal, because there's really no difference between men and women other than what's in between our legs, and that shouldn't be a determination of what we get paid or how we are treated. Um, and then my advertisement, I actually came up with a sweater and a slogan that said, "Take a stand, um, pay us what you owe us." Basically, meaning pay us what we deserve. If I'm working just as hard as you, I deserve to get paid just as much as you, regardless of my sex, regardless of anything, my color. It doesn't matter. If I'm working as hard, if I'm working for what I think I need to do, and if I'm succeeding, I should be paid and compensated for that, regardless of anything. So that is my project, and thank you for listening.